exciting opportunities here. Thank you. Yeah, it is my honor. Oh, we're going back here.
No, that's right. Just back.
Yeah, it is really my pleasure to introduce the next panelist, the Honorable Jeffery Merrifield. He's former commissioner of NRC. I have experience dealing with Jeff. He never sleeps, by the way. He got to College Station about 1 o'clock in the morning, and he wake up, maybe 4 or 5 o'clock and start to work. So that's why we get our nuclear power plant 104 that time in 2007. So it is really my pleasure to give us an overview about the state of energy in Washington. Jeff?
Thank you very much. Is this on? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Howdy.
Howdy.
All right, good. Listen, it is really a pleasure to be here this morning. I think I haven't seen an audience this large in a nuclear gathering since back when I was in college when they served pizza and beer. So I'm really happy you all came out with the coffee and the pastries. What I'm going to do today, I'm going to tell you just a little bit more about myself, and then I'm going to talk about my view of where things are in industry. And the reason I want to sort of introduce myself is to give you some sense of where I look at these issues, because I think I'm going to come at this from a little bit of a different place than the other panelists. I introduced myself to some of you, and I mentioned that my background was in science in undergrad. That was in political science. I was a poli-sci major, came to Washington in 1986, and spent 10 years working on Capitol Hill for a couple of members of Congress, and finished off as the lead staff director for the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee subcommittee on Superfund and RCRA. EPW, as that committee is known as, is also the oversight committee for the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. While I was doing that, I managed to get my law degree at Georgetown, focused on environmental engineering, and as a result of a series of consequences, found myself nominated to be a commissioner of the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission in 1998. I took that position under President Clinton, was reappointed and reconfirmed under President Bush, and was at the NRC for about 9 years. As mentioned, I had an opportunity during that time to visit all 104 operating nuclear power plants in the U.S. I also visited 30 of the 31 countries that then operated nuclear units. I became the most traveled NRC commissioner ever and have visited half of the world's nuclear power plants, plus a significant number of fuel and other radioactive related facilities. So I've got a very broad view there. From that point in 2007 to 2014, I was a senior executive with what was called the Shaw Group. Later, that company was sold to CB9 based in the Woodlands. They were responsible for a period of time of building the AP1000 units. Subsequently, that was sold to Westinghouse. More on that later. And so I had a real opportunity to be involved as in the operational side in industry. In 2015, I started as a partner with Pillsbury Law Firm. That's the oldest and largest nuclear law practice in the world. We've been around for about 50 years. About half of the work that we do is outside of the United States, helping countries that want to become nuclear entrants. And about half of the 20 attorneys with whom I work have a technical background. So there may be some of you who may decide, God forbid, you might want to become a lawyer. And there's some great opportunities out there for you as well. A lot of my work is working with the White House, DOE, NRC, utilities, suppliers. And so I'm going to give you sort of what I think is a fairly holistic look at what is going on right now. I'm going to cover an overview of nuclear power, and this will be inclusive of what's going on internationally. I'm going to touch on DOE and FERC, and those are very important actually right now in terms of where this industry is going. I'm going to touch on a few of the highlights of some nuclear energy legislation that is in front of Congress right now. Talk about advanced nuclear power deployment and then some conclusions. So first, just an overview, and I think it is important to sort of keep in context with what we have here in the United States, what is going on elsewhere. As it says there, about 440 nuclear power plants. Actually, that should say 31 countries operating them. 11% of the electrical generation worldwide, and 35% of our carbon-free generation. Now, I happen to be one of those Republicans that actually does believe that there's global warming going on. And there is, frankly, a lot of folks who are in that same boat, a bit quieter on my side of the political spectrum. But around the world, people do see that as an issue, that it's driving policy in China, it's driving policy in India, it's driving policy in a whole variety of places. So in that regard, people, I think, recognize the vital importance that nuclear power plays in carbon-free generation and maintaining electrical grids. A lot of construction going on right now. Obviously, we only have 2 units under construction here in the United States, in Georgia, at the Vogtle site, but a lot of work underway internationally. China being the largest one, 24 under construction, 42 planned, and a vision to have China to exceed the United States in nuclear power generation by 2030. India, fairly active program. As you may know, they adopted the Canadian pressurized heavy water reactor technology. Virtually all of their reactors, save one GE reactor and a couple of Russian reactors, are of that technology. Big market potential, however, and I'll talk about that a little bit when I talk about Westinghouse. Finally, Russia. I did a lot of work and tried to sell nuclear power plants with Westinghouse. They are an enormous competitor right now. They bring the full scope to the table, all the way from supplying uranium to dealing with the back end of disposal of fuel. And in Turkey, we're actually representing the entity building 4 nuclear units there. They actually are proposing a build, own, operate model. So they bring the money, they build the reactors, they operate them. That is a very desirable outcome for many, many countries around the world today. Highlights from the U.S. I want to stop a little bit on Westinghouse. I'm sure you've read a lot in the paper. I think there's a lot of concern. What happened with Westinghouse, and that's probably a subject of a whole lecture. The main point I want to leave with you about Westinghouse. There are today, Westinghouse is in the middle of a bankruptcy proceeding. They are in the second round, meaning that the bankruptcy court is reviewing and working with, right now, 5 entities that seek to purchase Westinghouse going forward. Our firm, and we've had to put up very careful screen walls on this, we actually represent 3 of the 5 companies that want to purchase Westinghouse. I can say, speaking for the company with whom I'm working currently, they want to buy that company as a whole and operate it as a viable asset going forward. Some others may or may not want to split it apart and get the value of the pieces more than the whole. But I have actually a fairly positive reflection on what bankruptcy means for Westinghouse, getting a lot of that debt out of the way and having a company that can move forward in some ways more competitively than its predecessor before. The summer units in South Carolina, obviously the economic issues that cascaded from Toshiba, Westinghouse to SCANA. I don't think that one is given up for all time. The governor of South Carolina, with whom I've spoken on this issue several times, I think very much wants to continue to move that forward. I think there are folks trying to figure out, is there a way to do it? And as we've seen in the U.S., there have been nuclear projects that have been delayed for years, but then construction brought back on and put into production. Watts Bar 2 with TVA in Tennessee being the most recent in that regard. The Vogtle units in Georgia under Southern Company, 65% complete. I think the most important thing here was a commitment by the Trump administration to provide $3.7 billion in loan guarantees. Despite the fact that earlier during the campaign and more recently in the early days of the Trump administration, they talked about killing the DOE loan guarantee program. I met directly with the director of the Office of Management and Budget, Nick Mulvaney, explained to he and his staff the importance of that program, and I'm very pleased to see that that recommendation was taken in moving that program going forward. Action on the part of states. This actually is a bit out of date. Illinois, New York, and now Connecticut have all passed legislation and signed it into law that will provide financial incentives to allow clean nuclear generation to have the economic support that it needs to continue to move forward. I think Tim will probably talk a bit more about that subject perhaps. Pennsylvania and Ohio currently have similar and varying types of legislation moving forward. Yucca Mountain, the Trump administration has said it wants to move forward with that. I think that will happen. Again, I think, like Mark said, I think a topic for question. DOE report on grid reliability. This came out of the Secretary's office. A lot of accusations about it being unbalanced. Frankly, I read the whole report and thought it was actually a pretty good piece of work. And really what it underlined is that with the activities that have been undertaken in the wholesale market, we've had natural gas, the price of natural gas has really been the driver in some of this instability we've seen in the fact that some of the non-intermittent plants, namely coal and nuclear, are threatened and shutting down. Renewables penetration does make a difference. It does have an impact on grid stability. I think it certainly indicated that was a challenge. And I think what they really were looking for is having a grid that had more reliability and resiliency built into it. And that was really, I believe, the main message that came out of that study. Well, where did that get thrown? It's getting thrown in the lap of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. This is a 5-member bipartisan commission that oversees grid reliability issues in wholesale markets. These are the current 3 members of the commission. Cheryl LaFleur, who's a Democrat. Neil Chatterley, a friend of mine who used to work for Mitch McConnell. He is currently serving as the acting chairman, and Robert Powelson, a Republican, who is there right now. There are 2 others, McIntyre and Glick, who have been nominated. I think they will likely be confirmed in the next several months. That will bring them to a full commission with a lot of major important policy decisions on their plate. On this slide, I'll leave you with the notion, I don't think there's going to be a lot of legislation moving forward on energy issues in the next year or 2. I do believe FERC and NRC will have a major role in where energy is moving forward. So the real action right now is with the commissions. There is a DOE proposal that was sent by Secretary Perry to FERC asking them to engage in rulemaking associated with allowing coal and nuclear plants to be appropriately compensated for the value that they provide for resiliency and redundancy in the market. As you can see here, the comments on that proposed rule were due about a week and a half ago. Final comments due on November 7th, and a process that will require the FERC to move forward relatively promptly. Now, a lot of debate within the context of FERC right now about where they're going to end out. I don't think they're going to end out with the proposals provided by the Secretary. I do think that there will be a desire to do some actions which would provide greater protection for the nuclear assets, to some extent the coal assets as well. I'm not going to go into the details of this slide. Just suffice it to say, all of the major committees with oversight over energy issues, Senate Energy Committee, Senate Environment Committee, House Science Committee, and House Energy and Commerce, all have legislation focused on promoting the deployment of advanced nuclear technologies. In the last Congress, pieces of that legislation sailed through Congress overwhelmingly. In the Senate, a predecessor to S512 went through, I think it was an 87 to 13 vote, similar overwhelming majorities in the House of Representatives. A real sea change. When I came to Washington in '86, Congress is sort of 50-50 on nuclear power. The fact that the U.S. Congress, even with the divisions we have today, there's some strong leadership on the Democratic side. Senator Booker of New Jersey, Senator Whitehouse of Rhode Island, who are strongly and favorably predisposed toward advanced nuclear technologies. That is a sea change and really very important as we see these trends going forward. The other commission I'll finish with is obviously the one on which I served, Kristine Svinicki, the chairman. She took the seat that I left back in 2007. Republican, Jeff Barron, a Democrat who's appointed by Henry Waxman of California. Jeff is really the one who sort of takes on I guess the roles are reversed. He should be on this side. Steve Burns, an independent. I worked with Steve. He served as general counsel. Actually, assistant general counsel when I was at the NRC. Later left the agency to head up and be general counsel at International Atomic Energy Agency. No, I'm sorry, at OECD, yeah.
and then came back, became a commissioner, and served as chairman in the last year and a half or 2 years of the Obama administration. There are two nominees, Annie Caputo, she's a Republican on the Senate Environment Committee, and David Wright, a friend of mine who was the chair of the South Carolina Public Utilities Commission, who have been nominated and who are awaiting Senate action. Like the folks at FERC, I believe their nominations will proceed sometime later on this fall. NRC, as you well know, cradle-to-grave regulation not only of the nuclear units, virtually all of the elements of the nuclear fuel cycle, and a whole variety of technologies, including industrial medical uses devices. So it's a busy job. Some people used to ask me, is it a full-time job? The answer was hell yes. That and more. An agency which has extraordinary impacts on nuclear energy. Now, the one thing I will say, I think there's going to be some changes to the NRC. As the political makeup, as the group of commissioners changes, I think there is a real strong push for the NRC to look at its regulatory basis and really see if there are areas where they can reduce regulatory burden. Because my view is, since I was there, that has been ratcheted up, and I'm sure Tim's got a strong view on that as well. Outside stakeholders, this is what I think it's important for folks to be aware. When I came to Capitol Hill, it was nuclear power was binary. Either if you like nuclear power, you talk to the Nuclear Energy Institute, right, the association for all the nuclear utilities and suppliers, or you talk to the environmental community, Greenpeace, World Wildlife Foundation, whatever. And so there weren't a lot of other people out there who were on the pro-nuclear side of the ledger. Well, that has changed dramatically in the last several years, both inside the Beltway and outside the Beltway, really providing an innovative environment where there are lots of folks from different perspectives who are saying, we believe in nuclear power, we believe it is important for global warming, and we believe it's part of the overall strategy for our country's secure energy future. Founded by an entrepreneur who made several $100 million, about 2/3 of which he plowed into this organization. They are engaged in clean energy efforts on behalf of nuclear, hydro, clean coal, and other energy and storage technologies. You're going to hear a lot more about them. They really made their name in the last couple of years. I am their chief nuclear advisor. I think you're going to be hearing more and more about them. But a variety of other groups that are out there, and I think those are important voices. I think they reinforce the kind of things that we in the nuclear industry have. Opportunities for advanced reactors. Small is good. Folks in the investment community, Ray Rothrock, among others, see them as a way of providing new energy for the 21st century. Now, part of that is driven by economics. They see it as a real opportunity. And I represent several entrepreneurs who invest in it because they believe in it. They believe they want to be part of a solution for energy. They want to deal with clean energy, but they also see it as a way to make money. Also, sovereign wealth funds. These are the Saudi Arabias, the Kuwaits, the Singapores of the world who have hundreds of billions of dollars of investment monies who are looking at these right now, figuring out where they want to put their money. So a real exciting opportunity going forward. Now there's a variety of them. I'm going to go through these very quickly. Molten salt reactors, terrestrial energy, among others. That's one I happen to work for, Canadian-based, but there's a variety. Transatomic was shown in the slides before. A lot of excitement about this, and certainly one that's taken a lot of attention. Small light water reactors, NuScale and Holtec, both US-based companies, developing reactors in the 40 to 160 megawatt range. I'm actually I need to amend this. Rolls-Royce has a reactor that they're developing and want to deploy in that light water space as well. Sodium-cooled fast reactors, TerraPower, you've heard about it. Bill Gates has put about $300 million of his own money and that of some friends as well in that technology. They intend to deploy those initially in China. Large reactors, I think 1,200 megawatt reactors. GE has its PRISM design. This actually dates back to the 90s when that received early licensing approval by the NRC. Advanced reactor concepts, very similar to the PRISM design, smaller. I think that's about 80 megawatts. Mark will probably correct me on that. But a collaborative approach right now between GE and ARC to deploy those in various locations. Gas-cooled reactors, this really goes back to both the pebble bed and prismatic reactors. X-Energy is another one I happen to work for. received a major Freedom of FOA grant from DOE, about $40 million, and I know they were working very closely with INL, among others. Lead-cooled fast reactors, there are some designs out there. I don't see these probably moving forward quite so fast, but they certainly, the technology is there. Supercritical water-cooled reactor, AECL Canada did have a design, again, one I don't think is really going to move very far. A lot of excitement about microreactors. There was a recent announcement by ARPA-E that they were going to be giving out some large grants in that area. Oklo, about 2 megawatt reactor designed by Jake DeWitt, who's an MIT grad. U-Power, which is a design by Urenco out of Europe. Ultrasafe Power, which is a U.S., Chinese, and Korean design. So a lot of interesting issues out there. And then fusion. Probably the two that get the most attention these days, TriAlpha, which is based out of California, has probably in excess of $500 million of investment in it right now. General Fusion, another one of my clients, that has a reactor technology they're developing out of Vancouver. Of all this number, our firm represents probably 15 of them, so we get to see a lot of different things going forward. So conclusions, I think there's going to be a lot of activity in Washington. It will be FERC, and to some lesser extent the NRC where that will go. Despite the challenges we've got in the U.S., I am optimistic that nuclear is growing internationally. I think there are great opportunities for the U.S. in the advanced space. Fusion technologies are going to get more attention in the next several years, and I do think there's some very good opportunities there. But at the bottom line, regulatory changes, not legislation, are what we're going to see in 2017. Thanks.
Next panelist, Mr. Tim Powell. He's the Chief Nuclear Officer at South Texas Project Nuclear Operating Company. As I mentioned, he's one of our graduate of nuclear engineering, 81. Also, Tim, he serves in our advisory council of Department of Nuclear Engineering. Also, give me a chance to thank Tim for his service in the South Texas project during Hurricane Harvey. As you know, nuclear power plant is standing and working fine all the time. Thank you, Tim.
Howdy.